All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to take a step back from the usual headlines, the billion-dollar unicorn companies, the massive venture capital deals. Instead, we're putting on our strategic thinking caps to explore a different kind of movement, one that's quietly changing the game, the microbusiness revolution, all seen through the lens of one fantastic book. So let's kick things off with the big question that's going to frame our whole discussion. In a world that is completely obsessed with getting bigger, faster, scaling to infinity, could a business that chooses to stay small actually be stronger, more resilient? It's a counterintuitive idea, and it's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look beyond the unicorns. Then we'll break down the book's simple but powerful rules. After that, I'll give you my professor's critique. Then we'll dive into a killer case study, Airbnb versus Quibi. And finally, we'll wrap up with an action plan you can actually use. Let's get into it. All right, section 1, beyond the unicorns. Before we can even get to the how, we've got to understand the why. We need to completely reimagine what being an entrepreneur can even mean in this day and age. The book at the center of all this is The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau. Now, you need to know this guy is not your typical business guru. He traveled to every single country in the world before he turned 35, and he's never had what you'd call a real job. And his research, it's not theory. He studied 1,500 real-life entrepreneurs who all built successful businesses with next to no money. This is all based on what works in the real world. So why are we talking about this now? Well, just look around. We are living in the golden age of the side hustle. It has literally never been easier to start something. But, and this is a big but, it's still incredibly hard to sustain it. This book is basically a playbook for surviving and actually thriving in this new economy. Okay, on to section 2, Guillebeau's simple rules. What I love about this book is how it cuts through all the noise. The core framework for this whole micro-entrepreneurship idea is just refreshingly simple. It all boils down to 3 basic things. You need a product or a service, you need people who are actually willing to pay for it, and you need a way to get paid. That's it. That's the foundation. Now, the most critical concept in the whole book is what he calls the Convergence Model. This is huge. It's not about just following your passion. It's about finding that sweet spot, that intersection where what you're good at meets something that people will actually open their wallets for. You have to be solving a real pain point. You might love knitting, but unless someone has a problem that your knitting can solve, it's a hobby, not a business. The second big idea is this bias toward action over planning. And this one really hits home. I mean, how many great ideas have died a slow death inside a 50-page business plan? Guillebeau makes this brilliant point that for a lot of us, all that planning is just a fancy way to procrastinate. The goal isn't to create the perfect plan. It's to get out there, do something, and get real data from the real world. And this is his solution, the one-page business plan. Forget the 5-year projections for a minute. This forces you to get brutally honest about the only 3 questions that matter at the beginning. Number 1, what are you actually selling? 2, what's the price? And 3, and this is the most important, how does this make your customer's life better? It's all about cutting through the clutter. And the third concept is the low-cost launch. Think of this as the scrappy DIY version of the minimum viable product, or MVP, you hear about in Silicon Valley. But there's a key difference. Instead of building something to attract investors, the goal here is to get immediate cash flow. You're trying to prove from day one that this is a viable business, not just a cool idea. Okay, so the model sounds great, it's inspiring, but now it's time to put on my professor hat. Let's look at this with a critical eye. From a pure strategy perspective, where does this micromodel absolutely shine? And where does it start to break down? The number one strength from a strategic point of view is something we call the power of optionality. By keeping your initial investment tiny, you are buying yourself options. You have the option to pivot, the option to change direction, or even the option to walk away without losing your shirt. In a world that's as volatile as ours, that kind of agility is an incredible advantage. It's a masterclass in real options theory. But let's be real, it's not a perfect system. We have to look at the trade-offs. The agility is a massive plus, but on the flip side, you have to worry about sustainability. If it's easy for you to start, it's easy for copycats to start too. There's the very real solopreneur trap, where you can't grow because you're doing everything. And from an academic standpoint, we have to acknowledge survivorship bias. The book studies the winners, but what about the thousands who tried this and failed? Okay, Siri is one thing. Let's make this real. We're going to look at two companies that are the perfect illustration of this mindset and the catastrophic cost of completely ignoring it. This is where the rubber meets the road. In one corner, you've got Airbnb, which is basically the ultimate platform for micro-entrepreneurs. And in the other corner, you have Quibi, which I call the anti-100 startup. One started small, solving a real problem with almost no cash. The other started with a massive big bang, assuming they knew what the market wanted. The Airbnb origin story is it's a textbook example of everything we've talked about. They found a perfect convergence. A big conference was in town, hotels were sold out, and designers needed a place to crash. Their launch? A super basic website and 3 air mattresses on their floor. They grew by empowering other people to become micro-hoteliers. It's brilliant. Now, let's talk about Quibi. The number you're looking at right now, $1.75 billion. That's how much money they raised before they even had a single customer. I mean, just think about that contrast. 3 air mattresses versus nearly $2 billion. So what was the fatal flaw? Quibi's spectacular failure is this giant flashing warning sign. They completely ignored the convergence model. They built a beautiful, expensive solution to a problem nobody really had. And they learned the hard way that no amount of money, no amount of celebrity star power can save a business that isn't solving a real customer need. Okay, so after that deep dive, the real question is, what do we do with all this? How can we take these lessons and actually put them into practice? In this final section, we're shifting from analysis to action. This is about building a plan you can use whether you're a founder or an innovator inside a big company. Here it is, a 4-step action plan. Step 1 is a personal skill audit. Figure out what you're uniquely good at. Step 2, I love this, is the Friday launch challenge. Just get something out the door by the end of the week to beat that analysis paralysis. 3 is all about capital efficiency. And 4 is about making that crucial mindset shift from being the owner who does everything to being the architect who designs the system. This is your roadmap. If there's one single idea to take away from our entire discussion, it's this quote right here. We think of entrepreneurs as these huge risk takers, right? But this model flips that on its head. This is about mitigating risk. It's a strategic way to reduce your exposure by starting small, proving your value, and then earning the right to scale. It's about building real resilience. And so that brings me to my first challenge for you. And I want you to be really honest with yourself. If all you had was $100 and your laptop, what value could you create that someone would actually pay you for by tomorrow? It's an incredibly clarifying question to ask yourself. And for those of you who are maybe in leadership positions at a larger company, here's your question. How can you create a culture that encourages these kinds of small, lean experiments? How do you prevent those massive, ego-driven, Quibi-style flameouts before they even start? And really, it all comes back to this one final, simple question. What's your convergence? Where does that unique mix of your skills, your passions, your expertise, where does it meet a real problem in the world that people are desperate to solve? If you can find that spot, you don't just have an idea, you have a starting line.